Hello and welcome to Scilence, a podcast where women get really honest about surviving and thriving in what often feels like a man's world. My guests are Wonder Women from the fields of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM, where inclusivity and diversity can be a real problem. I know this only too well. As a female Southeast Asian mechanical engineer, I was kind of a minority within a minority back then. I'm Dr. Shanice O'Mara, an engineer turned broadcaster. Throughout my career, I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation, and through my television work, I've met some incredibly inspiring women from a diverse range of STEM fields. Talking to these exceptional ladies has often left me feeling empowered, hopeful, and excited about life. I believe Scilence will enrich you too. Every week, a woman in STEM shares her unique experiences with absolutely no pressure in having to promote her accomplishments or guard her impressive reputation. Because I've come to realise that everyone's just way more open and relaxed when they're anonymous. So I deliberately disguise my guest voices so that we're just connecting as human beings rather than human doings. It's my hope that you really relate to what we chat about today, and if you do, please do subscribe to Scilence and maybe even rate and review the show. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guest is in the field of microfluidics. Hello.
Hi.
So much enthusiasm for a time when we're self-isolating.
I know it's been a crazy few weeks. I think with everything going on, it's bizarre, to say the least.
And it's so new to be in a situation like this. I mean, I've never ever experienced anything like this before in my life. So.
Yeah, neither have I actually. In a way, it feels very apocalyptic. But in a way, it feels we're far along enough, in scientific research that there is hope. Because I think if, this happened, say, maybe, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, it pretty much maybe we wouldn't have stood a chance.
Yeah.
But, today, and, with research happening so quickly, with scientists just coming up with vaccines every, 2-3 weeks, it boggles the mind. It truly does.
That's such a positive perspective. And thank you so much for that. Because honestly, I've been glued to the news and everything just sounds so terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to get lost in the negativity, but, you always need to put a spin of positivity in all this in this crazy world, because if we don't, then I feel like there will be no end. There will be no light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, especially because I've been, working from home, being quarantined at home, and after I think 3 days, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. Where is the light? And it's just sort of looking forward, waiting for the day that we can go to the pub and have a pint.
Gosh, I must say, as a self-confessed introvert, I've really been enjoying self-quarantine because I feel like in my daily life, I'm just non-stop, almost like playing a game of whack-a-mole, always just trying to hit those things that are popping up all the time, randomly, just trying to hammer them down. And I feel like I've really, for quite a number of months now, not been able to really be in the driving seat of my life. Sounds so dramatic. But as a result of all this self-quarantine, it's really allowed me to not waste time on commuting and instead spending time on getting my to-do list for that day in order and going through my to-do list in a methodical, paced way. And it's just been incredible for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's been great because my only commute is from my bedroom to my living room, which is now my makeshift office. But I think even the commute into work every day is sort of a way to get yourself prepped for the day. You make a mental note of what you have to do. So in a way, I think losing that commute time sort of takes you back from preparing yourself for work. So I think there are pros and cons of sort of being sort of working from home and then working in the office, because I think the office is sort of set up for you to do
Be
work, and then
productive.
home is where you unwind.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard to sort of, make that distinction right now because your home is your office.
Yeah.
But I think, it's a beautiful time for introverts to thrive.
I
So
totally agree. A lot of my friends are introverts, and we were just saying, my God, this is our time, finally. Because
yeah,
usually we feel
like
so
I've been
outnumbered.
exactly. I kept joking with my friend saying I have been practicing for this for my entire life.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of loving it. And obviously, on the serious side of things, like I do really want to protect myself and my family from,
Yeah.
um, you know, catching this. And I think it all comes with a very serious undertone because this virus seems to be
Yes.
out of control. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, just in terms of kind of me time, it's been really, really useful. And I have heard some people talk
Mhm.
about, the world is reaching their rock bottom and, there needs to be a huge reset of the way we do things.
Yeah.
And I really feel like what's been happening recently has allowed us to, just start doing more shopping online. And my parents are so
Yeah.
cute. They're like only discovering online shopping for the first time now. And it's just like, they're like, wow, this is who knew? And it's like, well, I love
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, with this whole coronavirus thing, I think it's definitely given everyone sort of a minute to step back and really evaluate what are they doing in life. Or at least for me, it's sort of I step back and I say, okay, what is my purpose in life? If we're looking at the bigger picture, really, like, do I really want to sit and work in a job that I don't enjoy, and then now I have to actually work on it from home? So I think
Right.
it's interesting because you're self-reflecting,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, you kind of don't have a choice because you're trapped at home.
Mm, yeah.
So I think,
I'm sure there will be a lot of people that are asking themselves if they're doing what they really want to do with their life.
yeah,
And yeah, I've certainly been sort of like asking myself that. And the answer is like, I want to do so much more. Um,
yeah,
and I just want to be so much more focused because I think life for me anyway is just very I'm pulled in lots of different directions,
yeah.
and so yeah, I just feel like uh, there are areas upon which I need to improve, put it that way.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time for you to maybe sort of work on that and pick up, skills that you would often sort of put off because you'd all, I mean, humans, we always have an excuse to not do something. And I think now is a perfect time to sort of, pick up a new skill. Like for myself, at least, I would really love to learn coding. And because I'm
Ah,
sort of juggling a couple of things at the same time. I think sort of working from home gives me that flexibility to maybe take an hour or two out of my schedule and say, okay, I'm setting this time just to learn how to code. And there's so many things available online, and
mm,
just spending a bit of time, you know, learning something now, I think would be really useful as well. And maybe, if this whole quarantine lasts for, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, at least at the end of it, I'd come out being able to code and I'd feel a bit accomplished.
do you reckon you will actually be able to code by the end of the quarantine?
I would like to think I would be able to, but even if I can do the basics, that would be good enough for
Yeah,
me.
that's brilliant.
Because I would feel like I've actually put my time to good use rather than just, you know, moping around the house saying, "Oh, I'm trapped inside and I don't know what to
Yeah.
do."
No, I mean that's such a fruitful way to look at things. What is your day job like in, on an average day?
So, because I'm a full-time researcher, so um when I was allowed to venture outside, my my job usually involved, sitting down, reading research papers, writing articles, writing research papers, working on my experiments in the lab. And then also at the same time, I also have a company on the side. So I work a lot on the business side of things. So that would be running in and out of business meetings,
Wow.
having meetings with my co-founders and sort of trying to develop the company as well.
Yeah.
Uh, but now that, we're trapped behind a desk, so it really just involves a lot of reading and a lot of writing.
Mm. All the things that you really needed to do but never had the time to do.
Exactly. All the things that are like, I put it aside saying, oh yeah, I'll read this 10 articles sometime. And now I actually don't have an excuse to not read it. And sort of just, I think because being in science and because things are moving so quickly, every day there's a new
New
creation, a new
development.
invention, a new
Yeah.
development. Exactly. And just to keep on top of things is so hard when you have a million other things to do. And
Yeah.
now that a major part of it's removed, so the part in which I do not have to be in labs, I can actually sit and focus on learning my field well enough.
Mm. Yeah. I swear we're going through a global reset. That's
I
amazing.
think so. And I think, with just our, I think humans in a way are very greedy. So in our desire and our need to just continuously develop, we've sort of, let the earth die a little. And I think this is Earth's way of resetting herself. So
Mm.
she said, all you humans get back in, let me just thrive for a while. And I think that's what's happening. And I think, if you look at reports on how pollution levels have decreased and
Yeah.
how uh, how the temperature, I think like even the global temperature's gone down a little. And I think I remember reading an article saying that pollution in Italy and China have reduced significantly.
Yeah.
So I think, in a way it's a good thing. Uh, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of it.
Mother Nature's getting back into the driving seat.
Yeah, I think she's had it with us.
Yeah. She's like, hey, let me show you who's in control, okay? Because you guys
Exactly.
have been carrying on like you're owning it, and actually you have no right to do that.
Yeah.
I really, I feel like this has been coming for a while. And, is it 2015 when Bill Gates predicted all of this? So
Yes.
yeah, it's been on the cards, and
It
now
has
we're
been
living
on the
through
cards, exactly. But I'm surprised that The Simpsons have not predicted this, so a little
it.
disappointed.
Gosh, I mean, it sounds like you have such a well-rounded life. I mean, for someone who's researching, also got a stake in the business world, and tech world. I mean, is this what you dreamed of doing when you were a kid?
If I'm really honest, no. I think from a very young age, I've always had this ambition of becoming a medical doctor. Um,
Right.
and somewhere along the way, I think I realized I just want to do science. I want to be in labs, do research, make a difference in a way that it will impact a larger part of the society. And but I mean, I like yes, doctors do make a difference every day, but I personally didn't see myself doing that anymore. So, and especially I think because I come from a um Southeast Asian background as well, just like yourself. Um, I think becoming a doctor was something that was expected of you, especially if if you're a girl, um, and you come from a Indian family. That's just something that's
It's at
kind
the
of
top of the
thrusted
list,
upon
isn't it?
you.
Medicine,
Exactly,
what is it? Medicine,
it's an
lawyer.
engineering, a
Yeah.
lawyer, or a teacher. And I mean, they're all fantastic careers, but I think that wasn't the career for me. And I
Mm.
think from a from I would say maybe between the ages of 16, 17, that's when I realized I don't want to fit in the norm. I want to do something else. I want to be a rebel and be different. And that's why I chose the path of, you know, doing science instead and becoming a full-time researcher.
It's so awesome. Like that was your way of rebelling. Other
Exactly.
people kind of get into drugs, follow their favorite rock band around the world and things. You got into another area of science. I mean,
It's another kind of drug, I would say.
yeah, I think so. It is really addictive, learning about tech and just watching it evolve because it's just so exciting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the possibilities. I mean, especially in this time of uncertainty, like we really are looking to science and data for answers now.
Yeah, and I think that's just how the human race is evolving, where we're so dependent on technology and we're so dependent on medicine and all of this stems from basic science, basic engineering, maths, and I think more people should be interested in this subjects and they shouldn't be afraid of just wanting to explore it.
Mm,
And I think what really astonishes me is that even though we're in the year 2020, the balance between males and females in this field is it's still not there. Like
yeah.
it's still very much a male dominated area. And and I just hope that, more girls would get into it and realize that it's cool to be a scientist and it's fun to be an engineer. And we need to break the stigma that it's a men's world. It's not.
Like, first of all, did you think that you were going to end up in medicine because you were good at STEM subjects, or
I
was
think
it expected?
I think partly it was expected, just because of my upbringing and my background. And another reason is because I generally always enjoyed science subjects, let it be
Mm.
chemistry or biology or not physics. I was never good at physics. So maybe, some stereotype is true. Um, but I think my relationship with the whole is there a gender balance in STEM subjects? I would say that I've been privileged enough to go to a school where there was a good balance between the genders, and even my university with my degree, there was a relatively good balance and uh a lot of males. They were quite helpful, so it wasn't a very competitive environment.
What did you study at uni?
Oh, so I did chemistry at university.
Ah, yeah.
So it was fairly balanced, and it was an environment where everyone helped one another, and it wasn't a environment where everyone constantly wanted to be better than the other person. So I think in a way I recognize that I'm privileged that way, and not everybody had the same experiences as I had.
Mm.
And I think it's always important that when you are in such situations, you recognize that you are, and sort of people, help other people who are not in your position. And if they are faced with, certain inequalities or issues that stem from a imbalance, that I think you should always recognize their privilege,
Yeah.
and it's really important.
Let's go right back to when you were a kid. Like, you say that it was kind of expected that you would go into some kind of medical field. Is that because you come from parents that were in medicine themselves?
Not really. So both my parents were not from a medical background, but I think it was more of society, and just it was a cultural thing. And I had family members who were in the medical field, and it was just assumed that I would go into the medical field.
Mm,
But I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much as I enjoy what I'm doing now.
mm,
And I think I think and I hope that it's moving. We're moving away from that expectation, if you're an Indian from an Indian family, that you are expected to go into these certain fields. And I think now parents are more
Yeah, even if you're not good at
exactly, and
STEM
I think now
subjects.
parents are sort of more open to the idea that, oh, my kid can do whatever they want, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that that generation, like our kind of parents' generation, it wasn't a question of what would you like to do when you grow up. It was more a case of
Yeah,
you need to do this because you need to earn good money and
yeah.
have a stable career, and the best way to get that is to become a doctor.
Yeah, and I understand where they come from as well, because, during their time, these were the jobs that provided you with a stable, income, and it was a safe job.
Mm.
Because, when if it was during my parents' time and I said, "Oh, I want to become a scientist," they've never actually heard of things like that. For example, my grandparents, if they would have never heard of, a scientist, or they wouldn't have been able to envision us working in a lab.
Mm.
So I mean, in a way, I understand where it stemmed from, and where this ideology that, oh, if you like the accepted or the treasured occupations are, being a doctor, being an engineer, being a teacher. I sort of understand where they're coming from, and I'm just glad that it is moving away from it, and our parents now, or parents now at least, are less pressured to sort of get their kids into certain fields.
Yeah. And now today, there seems to be such a wealth of different careers to choose from,
Exactly.
and careers that marry together almost conflicting disciplines.
Yeah.
So, like, some kind of scientist, material scientist working for a big sports shoe brand or something, where they get to test their materials, in sports applications. I mean, or, dance meets scientific
Yeah, and I
AI
think
or,
exactly, and I think that's exactly what's really interesting, is that the degree that you study at university does not necessarily correlate with the job you end up doing. And I
yeah.
think a lot of things are very much interdisciplinary.
Mm,
So I could be doing a science degree and I could end up working in an investment firm. And I
right.
think that's just the beauty of it. And I think no one really envisioned it, that it would be such.
Mm,
And I think, as time goes on, I think to a point, education would even move in a way where you wouldn't have to declare a fixed major, where you could sort of learn anything
mm,
and then end up doing anything.
yeah. Which is why subjects like engineering are so great, because they are so broad.
Yeah.
Um, how did you make the segue from chemistry to starting a startup?
Well, if I'm being really honest, I would say every great idea starts with a cup of coffee. And or tea in my case, because I don't drink coffee. And that's honestly how it started. It started with a bunch of us having a cup of tea and coffee at our university cafe, and we started just having a general chat, and an idea was born. We worked on it, and we sort of segued into business and trying to get our tech to work. And eventually we started distributing roles within the company. And I said, as much as I enjoy research, I would like to dip my toes in something different. To sort of to switch on another part of my brain. So I said I'll take on the business side of things. So then I could pick up new skills,
Yeah.
and that's honestly how I sort of ended up doing the business side of things for the company.
Gosh, and how's it going?
It's going great. We're currently in the midst of prototyping, so our CTO is hard, or at least he was hard at work in the lab, trying to get our prototype ready for our for our timeline, which is meant to be in June. but everything's been pushed back now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Uh, but we'll somehow still work through it, I guess.
Yeah. It just seems like a very brave move to go from academia and deep research to really kind of catapulting yourself into the big wide world of business. Has it been scary?
If you has it been scary? Yes, but you often should do the things that scare you the most, because I
Mm.
always say that if something doesn't scare you, it means you're not passionate about it, because you don't if something doesn't scare you, and even if you lose out on it, you wouldn't really care. So the more something scares you, the better it is, and you should challenge yourself to overcome it. Um, and there have been times where, I walk into a room filled with all these accomplished entrepreneurs, and I go, do I even belong here? What am I doing here? But sometimes you just sort of suck it up and you fake it and till you make it. And, you know, there are good days and bad days, And some days you think, oh, I'm on top of the world. And then some days you go, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But you always come out just knowing that if my tech goes out into the world, it will make someone's life better. And even if it only changes one person's life, it is still someone's life that I've changed.
Have you felt the difference of being female in what I'm assuming is quite a male dominated world?
Um, that's a very interesting question, actually. Yes, the business world is very much male dominated, and the entrepreneurial world as well. But I think once again, I I have been quite lucky in the sense that I have been given amazing support by loads of different establishments, um, where it brings together a lot of women entrepreneurs. And in
Mm.
fact, that is exactly how I met you as well, through an event that was run
Mm.
specially for female entrepreneurs. And I think because everyone in the group recognizes that we need to rely and we need to support each other in this very male dominated world. And I think even the males that are involved in the program recognize that, and they help us and support us and provide us with advice any time of the day if you need it. And I think that alone is so essential. And and I don't think it's hindered me in any way with bringing
Yeah.
the business forward.
Okay. I mean, because it sounds like your chemistry degree, you were surrounded by very supportive colleagues, whether they were male or female. And so you've built up that kind of
Yeah.
robustness of being who you are during your university days, which has really laid strong foundations for your sort of self confidence and self assertiveness as you've gone into the business world. Do you have any advice for young women
Yeah.
embarking on a similar journey where it's likely they will be surrounded by a lot of men, essentially?
I think if I have to give any advice, I think all I would say is don't be afraid. And very often they are just as afraid as you are, and just go for it. There's there's no right way to do something and there's no wrong way to do something, especially when it comes to, being in business or even in a job. You don't know something until you try it. So yeah, just go for it, and don't be afraid to mess up, because some of the greatest lessons that you learn in life is through mistakes. And I think sometimes that's how I learn things as well, where I have made a lot of
Mm.
mistakes. And I think those are the times that I learn the most, because I know that, oh, I should not do that. Um and Yeah, I think that would be one of my biggest advice to a lot of young girls out there. Just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really sound advice, but really difficult to put into practice because
I
for a lot of people that make mistakes, like that can almost be prohibitive.
It could be exactly. It could be. I know it's something that's very frightening to sort of make a mistake, and I think it's also just the way that sometimes women are sort of wired
Yeah.
that if we make a mistake, we're no longer the best or we're no longer good
Mm.
enough. And I think that's sort of a mentality that should be changed because men aren't afraid of making mistake. Why should we be afraid of making a mistake? If we make a mistake, we own it and we learn from it. And I think that's the only way you get better at something.
Yeah.
And I know
Do you think that
it's,
we're biologically wired to respond that way to mistakes, or is this just a case of changing your attitude?
I think it's not that we're biologically wired that way, but I think we're sort of been molded that way because of society. And I think if we sort of break past that mold and say, screw it, I'm I'm going to make mistakes and sort of approach it in a more positive spin instead of looking at it from a negative perspective,
Mm.
then I think we'll be less afraid to sort of make a mistake, take a wrong turn, and not aim for perfection because perfection is overrated at times. So
Yeah. I mean, I, you're absolutely right. Everybody makes mistakes, but I really feel like it's the way we carry ourselves through those mistakes that makes all the
yeah,
difference. And what I've
yes,
noticed in my life is that men and women seem to have a completely different language. Like
yeah,
men, when they make a mistake, and I'm really sorry about having to like categorize men and women because I do feel like we're moving into an era where the sort of male female divide is actually becoming quite old fashioned. Um,
yes,
but just generally speaking, in old fashioned terms, men do seem to speak a language whereby if they make a mistake, they don't dwell on it. They kind of like brush it under the carpet
yeah,
and just go, oh, well, it was because I woke up late that day and so I wasn't thinking straight. Whereas women go into this like deeply self critical, over analytical period of reflection, trying to understand why it
yeah.
happened. And that can be really debilitating.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's sort of just sometimes that could just be the way that we're wired, where we constantly aim for perfection. Um, and I think that's just because of the pressures that have been put on us by society, where if you're a woman, you are expected to be of a certain way. And by making just one mistake, you've sort of messed that up. And and I think with men, and I completely agree with you, where I don't think we're in an era where we should be distinguishing, between men and women anymore. But just in a very general sense, I think men care less. And not all men, some men, they just care less. They think and they brush it off and they move on, whereas we just continuously dwell on it. And I think even I'm guilty of making that mistake. If I do something wrong, I tend to sit and overanalyze things, thinking, "Oh, why did I do that? Oh, what will that person think, and what will that person think?" Where in reality, no one actually cares about it anymore. Like you've apologized, and everyone's moved on except you. And I think if we sort of take a step back and go, "Okay, I've apologized. What can I learn from it? And what should I do in order to prevent myself from making the same mistake?" And I think if we just change the language that we use on ourselves, I think we can come a long way.
Yeah. I love that expression, like the language we use on ourselves, because often, if we struggle with sort of how we handle mistakes, it's because of the standards we hold
Yeah.
ourselves to. What's been your experience with that? Like, because to have studied where you have studied and to set up a technology startup and things like that, like you've got to have been extremely accomplished, a successful student. So you must either the high standards come naturally, or you've really expected that of yourself.
I think it's more that I've always been told this, that I set expectations that are way too high for myself. And then when I don't meet those
Mm.
expectations, I get really upset with myself. And I've been and I think over the years I've slowly learned how to set manageable expectations where I know that I can reach them and maybe go a little bit beyond. Um, and I think a lot of it came with practice. And because I remember having this conversation with my supervisor where I set the most unrealistic expectations, and obviously I didn't meet it. And I went up to him and said, "Oh, I'm so upset with myself, and I don't think I'm good enough to do this. And I think there's uh, so many other students out there that should be doing this project, and I think you've made the wrong choice." He sat me down, and he's a very supportive supervisor, and I'm very thankful that I have him. And he sat me down and said, let's just take a step back and look at the expectations that you set yourself. You It was very obvious that this is something that should take at least 6 months to achieve, and you were looking at, I think I was looking at about a 3 month time frame. And he said obviously you were not going to achieve it. Like, it was just humanly not possible.
Impossible,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It's just completely impossible. Setting unrealistic expectations, not meeting it, and then being so hard on yourself. So we
Mm.
actually he then sort of talked me through um how I could, reset those expectations, reset those milestones. And then we came to a point where we both agreed what would be a realistic milestone. And then 3 months down the line, I did meet those expectations, and I said, oh, I do feel quite good about myself, actually. And then I sort of always used that point, that particular incident in my life, and I've always sort of looked back at that and went, that if no one had told me at that point that this is not how I should be handling myself or the language I should be using on myself, I don't think I would have ever learned. And I think I would still constantly be, you know, I would have been too, constantly being so hard on myself for not achieving something. And I think not everyone is lucky as me to have somebody to sort of point me towards the right direction. But, if someone just, maybe if someone who's listening to this podcast right now sort of recognizes that this is the same thing they do, and maybe if I sort of help them realize that, okay, guys, let's set real expectations here. Like, let's not overestimate myself. Then I would say, maybe I've helped someone today, and that would make me feel better as well. So
Yeah. I mean, it sometimes it can feel a bit like you're slacking
yeah,
when you go a bit easier on yourself. And it's like, oh no, but I'm like, I know I can get an A triple star, as opposed to just an A type of thing. But actually, getting just an A can lead to just greater
I
fulfillment.
mean, I think
Um,
there's a difference between slacking off and, doing your best.
Trying to have a balanced
Yeah,
life.
exactly. I think just because, you're setting more realistic expectations, it does not necessarily mean you're slacking off. And I think that's sort of a mentality that a lot of people have in this world today. I think because everything's moving at such a quick pace that, people think that, oh, I have to constantly be on top of it. there are days where you could, take some time off, relax, and you're not going to be left behind. You will be left behind when you burn out at the end because you've just not given yourself any time off.
Yeah. I mean, I think different things have different values to different
Yeah.
people. So rest and relaxation time can hold more value to one person compared to another.
Yeah.
And certainly when I was a student, any time off or fun or just kind of like recharging time
Yeah.
felt like a complete waste of time. Like I remember sort of like, if my friends said, oh, let's go to the movies, I'd think I couldn't possibly allocate 2 hours sitting in front of a screen doing nothing. And it
Yeah.
even got to the point where like sleeping, I felt guilty sleeping. And I would
Yeah,
like
no,
record all my revision notes on tape and listen to the tape while I was sleeping.
sleeping.
Or
No, I
so I
think
thought.
I was
Yeah.
very much similar to you as well. And I think I sort of fell into this very negative hit space
Yeah.
at one point uh in my PhD. And I just, I want to say I was depressed, but depression is such a heavy word to use. But I was just in a very
Mm.
dark headspace, and I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to see my friends, and it was one of those weeks where I was working, 16-hour days, and I was working on the weekends, and I'd not seen my friends in months. And I walked into my supervisor's office, and he said, "You look like hell." And and it was not a pretty sight. And he said, "Give yourself a week off." And when someone tells you that, I think you sort of sit back and evaluate your choices, and you go, "Oh,
Mm.
do I want to be working 16 hours every day and not taking care of myself? Do I want to continue on in this path and burn out in the end?" So I did take a week off, and I didn't look at my work. I unsynced all my emails, which I later regretted, but it still felt good.
Right.
But it
Because rethinking was a nightmare.
yeah, thinking back and then replying to all the mail that had come in. But it felt good that entire week. I didn't even look at my phone. I went on a complete detox, and I explored London. I was walking around London. I was going to coffee shops and cafes, and I did a bit of retail therapy, and it felt good because I was recharged, and then I took a day to just sort of write down what my goals for the year was and what I wanted to accomplish. Let it be with my research, my career, or the business, and it really felt good. And since then, uh, I've sort of told myself I am not going to work on the weekends unless absolutely necessary. And I made more time for friends and more time for family. And I think I've been in a much better headspace since then. And I think it's
Mm.
really important that we recognize when it's time for a break. And I think mental health is something that people so often don't talk about because it's taboo. And especially in an Indian family, it's definitely not something you bring up. But
Mm.
I think I'm lucky enough that when I spoke to my parents about it, they sort of understood uh, what I was going through, and it wasn't a very typical response where they said, "Oh, just sleep it off," or "Oh, just work a bit less." But they actually sat down with me and sort of I spoke to them about how I was feeling and why it was really important for me to take a week off, and they were very supportive. And even till today, they make they make sure that I don't work too hard, and I'm lucky in that way. And I reckon, and I realize that not everyone would have supportive parents that way, but sometimes all it takes is just a conversation, and you never know how it would turn out.
Mm. Yeah, and I think being honest and sort of admitting that y you may be struggling
Yeah.
can often kind of open the gateway to opportunities for growth
Yep.
and becoming stronger as a person because you're saying, you know what, I'm overwhelmed or I need help or I can't cope.
Yeah, but that's often the
Um,
hardest part, isn't it? Sort of
yeah,
recognizing
yeah,
and admitting that you need help, because it's more of like it's a kind of a pride thing as well, where people feel sort of sometimes they're just too proud to sort of say
mm.
I need help. And I think
I think there's a high concentration of women in STEM like that because they are so capable and they are so accomplished. So the idea of getting to a point where you actually say, you know what, this is all a bit too
yeah,
much, just isn't in our vocabulary because we've always managed to cope.
yeah, and I think it's also the expectations that, oh, because she's a woman in STEM, because she's a woman in general, is that, oh, of course she's going to suffer from, so she needs help. And I think because of
Yeah,
that alone, I think we tend to less likely ask for help. And I think that's
yeah,
something that it's very sad, but at the same time, I think it's something that we should try to work past, that we have feelings too.
definitely.
And there are days where I just don't want to get out of bed. I just want to stay in bed all day. And it's fine.
Mm.
It's fine to have bad days, because just like good days, bad days exist too. And I think that's something that we should recognize.
And I'm sure there are men that go through that too.
Oh,
I mean, I'm
definitely.
sure there are guys. I mean, I'm sure it's a people thing,
Yeah.
not a gender
Yeah.
thing, where people are just like, you know what, this is all a bit too much. Um, and I think it would be so great if we got to a point where we're all just being very honest about our capacities. Because what I have experienced in STEM is that no one talks about their capacities. Um, and in STEM, we're very much a head-led society. I mean, we're functioning on data and equations often, and just very sort of logical, rational means. But at the end of the day, we are also human beings with a heart and a soul. Um, and I've found in STEM that you often have to put your heart and your soul to one side in order to maintain your kind of academic authority or scientific
Yeah,
authority.
I think it's more of being, because you're expected to be logical, and you're expected to sort of
Not have feelings.
not have feelings in a way, exactly, and you think with your brain and not your heart. And I think because when you're in that headspace for such a long time, it's very easy to neglect how you feel. But I think,
Yeah.
I think with a lot of, mental health awareness movements and things like that that's happening in STEM itself, I think more emphasis is being put on talking about our feelings. And I think there's also a very scientific approach to it, and maybe that would appeal to the larger, to the community, because if you plaster the word scientific in front of it, people will come and people will listen. So that's great.
Mm, that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, as we navigate through our periods of quarantine and you teach yourself how to code, um, it really does show that uh, we are moving into an age where everything is becoming technology driven.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think any of us would have been able to cope during this time without technology. Um, in terms of working from home, ordering online, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I'm really hopeful for the future because I feel like as we become more technology dependent, um, hearts and minds will start to come together through technology. So things won't be so binary. and technology may assist us in being more heart-led,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think we don't realize how reliant we are on technology until this whole quarantine coronavirus crisis hit us, where like you said, if this was something that happened 50 years ago, I don't think the workforce would have been able to cope with it.
Mm.
Working from home would not have been possible, most probably. And I think we would have been bored out of our minds. We would have had we would have had certain things to do, but Netflix wouldn't have been a thing. YouTube, the well, I guess the internet was around, but we wouldn't have had uh access to things like our laptop and our phones. And I think as we move forward into the future, and even if something like this hits us again in another 50 years from now, I think number one, we would be more prepared. And number two, I think technology would take us a long way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for that reason, we need to close the gap between the genders in STEM. And I really do feel like women need to uh, embrace their inner scientist and inner engineer, because I think these subjects are not gender specific. So,
No, they're not. Like, I think, if you want to be the next Melinda Gates or Bill Gates, go for it. If you want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, go for it. And I think STEM related subjects, you know, it is for everyone. It is for every boy and every girl. And it's not something that's, like you said, gender specific. And I think if you have a genuine love and interest for it, you should explore it and you should go for it. And if
you didn't really mean what you said about not being good at physics because you're a girl, then, right?
no, I mean that was a joke, but I generally am not good at physics. But no, I mean I think it's just because you're a female or a male, it does not mean you shouldn't be in STEM. I think
Yeah.
if you love the subject, you should go for it. And
Yeah, because I feel like, what you said about physics, I think girls, if they are not so strong in any of the STEM subjects, they think, it's not for me. But, often you must know this from your startup experience. You know, everything is learnable. I mean, even
yeah,
with your coding aspirations, like it's all a matter of just sitting down and learning.
yeah. I mean, I think if there's nothing in this world that you can't do if you don't learn it. Like, I want to code, I can learn how to code, and we have access to that through technology. And if you want to learn, I don't know, chemistry, for instance, then you can learn chemistry through technology. And I think everything is available out there for us to sort of learn.
Mm,
And that's the wonder of the world today, that a chemistry major can run a business, or a business major can do some form of science. And I think that's
mm.
that's just the beauty of it, isn't it? And I think that's where the world's heading towards as well, where everyone can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the myths that is often associated with STEM is that you can't really do all the things that women aspire to do, like start a family and things like that. If you're in a STEM career, because it's so male dominated.
Yeah.
In your experience, do you reckon that still stands?
Um, to a certain extent, I think yes, but I am hopeful that it will change, and it is changing. And I think a lot of effort is being put to sort of wipe out that stigma. Um,
Mm.
and
Do you reckon you'll be able to juggle things like personal relationships, family, that kind of thing, being in technology?
Yeah, I think I could do that and a little bit more. I think that, I I think I want to strongly believe that I will be able to do that, and I will be able to have, personal relationships outside of work, have a family, and have a career all in one go. Um, and I think a lot of support is also being put in place to allow people to have that. Um, and so, yes, if you ask me if I'm hopeful, I am very hopeful.
Do you know what? Given the fact that you started out as, PhD in chemistry research and then uh, took the leap into starting a technology company yourself, and given your attitude, I have every faith that you will be able to juggle even more in your life.
Oh,
So
thank you so much.
I really feel like it's not just about what's possible, but it's also about one's attitude that can get you what you want in life. And talking to you today has really kind of shown me that it's all about optimistic and positive thinking. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I hope that someone out there listening this would probably maybe get inspired to sort of join STEM and have their own business and run their own company and have it all. So thank you so much for having me.
That's it from my STEM guest this week. Gosh, what a woman. For someone who is juggling so much, who's still able to have such a chirpy and bright attitude towards life is really, really inspiring, especially during this time of quarantine and self-isolation. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast this week. And don't forget, there are many more episodes where you can really delve into the attitudes and perspectives of women in STEM. And like my guest today, you can really learn from and really feel kind of invigorated for pursuing a career in STEM as someone who's a minority or maybe not following the crowd. It is totally possible if that's what you want. Thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to rate and review, and catch you next week on Scilence.